Hello, Shemai Croiso, and welcome to the Fathers of Metal podcast with myself, Daddy Hugh.
And myself, Papa Ben. Hi, Hugh. It feels like it's been a while since we've done this.
It
Well, this
has been
particular show, I suppose it has been.
No, absolutely. There's been plenty happening in the more recent world of metal with album releases and stuff. I think
Yeah,
we've been spending quite a lot of time in what's happening in the now rather than what's happened in the whole 31
yeah.
to 40 years ago. So
I,
that's
I
sort of, yeah.
I can tell you for a fact I've spent a lot of the last month, like neck deep in technical death metal.
Yeah, you've been deathing it up, haven't you?
Yeah, all
As have I, to be honest,
yeah,
actually.
all thanks to the Cannibal Corpse album that we reviewed, of which I am aware is not technical death metal, but that's the rabbit hole I ended up falling down after listening to that album.
It's not technical death metal, but technically it's death
it's
metal.
definitely
That's the way to describe it. So, everyone, we're here tonight. So, welcome to our next episode of our Rockerspective series, where in this video, Papa Ben and I, we're looking at a very important year in metal. And this particular year we're talking about for this episode, it was a major launch pad for what came next, which saw one of the biggest mass movements or scenes in metal history. And Papa Ben, tell us which year we're looking at today.
This time we are looking at the legendary year of 1980.
Oof, juicy.
The year that, I mean, like as you said, probably the biggest mass movement, and possibly the biggest wave of influence into America that could have happened. Without this movement happening in 1980, we probably wouldn't have got bands like Metallica, Megadeth,
Manowar, etc.
Manowar. Without this movement, we'll kind of go into it in a sec, but without this movement going across the pond, we wouldn't arguably maybe metal wouldn't be here by now. So
yeah, it's a good point because I think could safely say in the 1970s, with plenty of exceptions, that the main you can call it pioneers, people steering it, the leaders were effectively all from England, effectively, or Wales if you count Budgie and plenty of other bands. But it was really much a UK based thing, with Sabbath, Judas Priest, Deep Purple, Motorhead, etc. Well, yeah, Budgie, of course. Again, with the odd exception, you got like the Scorpions, of course, from Germany. Germany, of course, contributed a lot along the way as well. But yeah, obviously, so New Album, isn't it? It's referred to sometimes when it's written in acronym. New Album, the new wave of British heavy metal. So technically, it didn't start on the 1st of January 1980. Now it's 1980, but it technically you could say it was kick-starting around 1979 anyway, because Motorhead released a couple of albums as Overkill and Bomber, I think so, in the year 1979 as well. That was obviously a huge part of it. All the bands who released albums in 1980 were gigging and working on the 1980 album in the year 1979 as well. So I think you could safely say started the year before that, or potentially when a shitload of British bands heard Van Halen's first album, thought, shit, we got to up our game. Potentially again another what you call a anomaly, I suppose, because obviously they are from the United States of Van Halen. So so there we go. So 1980, of course, we're talking about. So we've got a lot to get through tonight. So just before we get started, just a reminder to all those who are tuning in, we are METALIDADS. This is the Fathers of Metal podcast. So METALIDADS, we are based all over Wales in the UK, and we are a community of fathers who act as a paternal and well-being support network for each other and discuss all things metal. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you would like to join our small army of dads, then find us on Facebook by visiting www.facebook.com/groups/METALIDAD. So Ben, we've got a lot to get through tonight. So what we're going to do, as always, we keep changing the format to try and make these shows a bit shorter. We'll change the format again tonight, so we don't have a 4-hour show like 1984. It felt like 2 days, but
it felt like 2 days editing it.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. So what we're going to talk about our favorite album, our favorite song, our favorite riff, favorite album cover, most influential album, most disappointing album, and most surprising album. Okay.
Yes.
So Ben, first of all, we are going to talk about our favorite album, and I know I've really been thinking about this very hard. It's been very difficult to choose one this year, specifically because probably my favorite album, the one I know back to front the most, that I've heard for the longest, you could say it's actually not a metal album at all. It's a rock album. So, and I know you said you're not a huge fan of this album, so I'm gonna let you go first. If you don't mind.
Okay.
Ben, what is your favorite album of this year and why?
Okay, so I just kind of while we're doing these Rockerspective listenings, in the kind of month or 6 weeks or so that we give ourselves to listen to a load of stuff, I've said to you multiple times that I found 1980 to be quite a tough year for me, because my listening kind of, the comfortable end of my listening stops from about 83 when Metallica released Kill 'Em All, and then everything after that I'm fine with. So 83 to present, that's fine. Anything before that, I'm not attuned. My ears aren't attuned to it so well. So this year was a very challenging year for me in a good way. I've you know,
as you said, educational, but out of your comfort zone, isn't it?
Very much out of my comfort zone. So possibly the best way I can describe it is that I potentially lost patience with a lot of albums. Not every album, but a lot of albums. I need to skip this song, or I need to do this.
Yeah.
So that's just to put it in context to me. But while going through all these albums, there was one that stood out to me massively. I mean, for me, you know, this was head and shoulders better than anything I listened to at 1980, which is going to upset some people. I know for a fact, and I know for a fact I'm going to upset people later on in the show. But in my opinion,
spoiler alert.
In my opinion, head and shoulders better than any album this year that came out was Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, which was incidentally also the debut album that involved their, at the time, brand new singer, Ronnie James Dio, who obviously we know, God rest his soul. If he believes, I don't know what his stance was on that, but
Can't
yeah,
ask him, unfortunately.
No, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So Head and Shoulders, it was from the first moment I listened to it to the last song, it blew me away. In fact, it had a similar effect to me. Let me just move my mic a little bit. There we are. It had a similar impression on me, possibly I could say, as Rust in Peace did from 1990, in terms of like it just the sound of that album. Of Heaven and Hell now was just so, for me, it was just so advanced compared to what was out there at the time. It was so revolutionary that nothing else could touch it from that perspective. Yeah. I don't want to kind of harp on and keep praising it, but basically that it just completely stood out for me. From as soon as I listened to Neon Nights, as soon as that kicked in, it's got that really catchy. It's got a really catchy riff as it kicks in. It reminds me of a riff. It reminds me a little bit of the riff, the Top of the Pops riff, a little bit.
Whole lot of love.
Whole lot of love. Thank you. That's it. Yeah. It very, very, very just. It was just one of those where I listened to it the first time. I thought, oh, that's There was a little, and that maybe that hooked me. That was enough to hook me. And then, and just vocally, that album, you know. I think that's the best vocals I've heard on any album from 1980, which is saying a lot, because obviously Judas Priest also released an album that year. But honestly, I think Ronnie was such an anomaly in heavy metal, and such a pioneer, that his influence and his working relationship with Geezer and Tony was so good, because I mean later on they ended up reforming the band Heaven and Hell, and they kind of went from there. So like their working relationship was really good, and you could really tell that this album was just so tight, and it was just so different, and it was just revolutionary to me anyway. It was absolutely revolutionary. I can't say a bad word about it. There wasn't a bad song on it. I couldn't find a bad song.
Very much like Rust in Peace. Literally, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, meaning you just got to listen to it to get it. There's not much else you can say about it, I suppose.
Yeah.
weird enough, just quickly on that album, just my contribution to your amazing contribution. Weirdly enough, when I first listened to the album, I was actually very disappointed. I don't know why. I think it was because I was listening to it in the car, and it took me probably a week to listen to it. So I didn't get it. But then I went for a run and I put it on my headphones. I thought, oh fuck, it's like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
How have it's taken me this long to like it? And I've always been curious, how much influence did Ronnie James Dio have over all the other instruments are doing besides his vocal contribution and his lyrics? Because I think hands down, he has got a major hand in the genre of power metal, and even
massive.
this huge, but not even just with Holy Diver, which came out 3 years later. This album, there's a lot of power metal traits. Again, a lot of the traits which Rainbow's album Rising in 1976 had was, and again, that was obviously his vocals. How much influence did he have in 1976? Not entirely sure. That's the question. But there's elements of power metal I can hear, early power metal I can hear in this album, and even symphonic power metal as well, by how he sings.
You could argue that this could be the first power metal album. You could,
it's tough.
It's Genesis, if you see what
potentially. I mean. Again, 1976, I think Rainbow, the album Rising, again, Ronnie James Dio. I think that's credited with one of the earliest ones. But then again, people say the earliest power metal band technically could be Judas Priest, but they weren't a power metal band, but they were doing elements potentially before. But again, it's like thrash sometimes. Things aren't invented in a flash and in a vacuum. It happens over time, like most metal genres, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because, hardly anyone's ever said, I'm going to start this metal genre today. Boom. Invented.
Actually, not to go too off on a tangent. The only
we haven't
genre,
got time to go off on a tangent.
the only genre I can think that was kind of more like that perspective was death metal, because although there was a few albums that lay claim to being the first death metal album, I think most people will agree that I can't remember his name. It's completely.
It's one of two. It's one of two. Yeah, it's got to be Chuck Schuldiner.
That's it. Yeah.
Or of Death or Possessed.
And it very much feels like he just kind of went. It feels like Chuck kind of just went, I'm just gonna make a death metal album, and it just kind of comes across in the same way that he did it with technical death metal. Just all of a sudden, he just went, I'm just gonna record a technical death metal album. What is that? Well, we'll figure it out as we go.
Again, another anomaly, which we will talk about probably in another episode. Yes. But so quickly, so your favorite album is Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. Excellent, awesome choice, by the way. But I'm going to quickly go over mine. Just so I can see a reaction. I'm really curious. Okay. There are so many good albums of this year. Like, I'm massive Judas Priest fan, massive Iron Maiden fan. Those 2 albums released that year were incredible. I've known about them for a long time, but there's an album I've known for much longer, and I know it back to front, and I know every single second of it, probably as familiar as the back of my hand. And probably for that reason, I'm going to have to say this is probably my favorite album of that year. Because I'm trying to give different answers for all our 7 or 8 questions, but I'm just to see a reaction. My favorite album is Back in Black.
Okay.
By AC/DC. As a rock album, it's I think it's a great rock album. I know you think it's like generic.
It's like
I know you think it's very generic.
I absolutely 100% appreciate what they've done for that, for rock and metal, because at the end of the day, they influenced so many artists that went on to create metal bands, successful ones today. So I get it. I get that side of things. But I also think that they, especially Back in Black, I've listened to it multiple times now, and it's vanilla. To me, it is
vanilla,
the most.
That's what.
Vanilla's not a bad thing. If I had a choice of ice creams, I tend to go for vanilla. But for some reason, I listen to it and I'm like, I get halfway through the album and I'm like, please let this be the end of it. I have to check what song I'm on because I can't tell the difference between songs. It's too vanilla.
I see. No, it's a weird one, really. Like production wise, they haven't released an album close to this, probably with the exception of Power Trip.
That's a band.
Power Up. Sorry, that's the thrash metal band. Power
Yeah,
Up. Sorry, the new one.
yeah.
That actually has a similar recording sound to it.
Okay.
But as a singer, I know you just said, funny, we got like a mutual opinion. No, it was quite an opinion, but like point. You reckon Ronnie James Dio's vocal contribution for that year was incredible.
Yeah.
If I can think about probably one of my favorite vocal contributions to any album ever, as a singer myself, I find it hard to top what Brian Johnson did in this album. Specifically, the reason because I like this album a lot extra because of the story behind of it being. It's pretty much one of the greatest comeback albums ever. Not to say comeback album from a previous bad album, because the album before this was 1979's Highway to Hell, and that late 70s AC/DC was a lot more raw, a lot less vanilla, had a lot more bollocks to it. And then the vocals backed it up with Bon Scott. But Brian Johnson, he does a lot of he sings like this now because that's what happens when you do it for 40 years or so. So he sings like that. But on the actual Back in Black record, he actually sings. He actually sings. It doesn't scream sing. That's the only album. I don't know if he was just he basically did something to his voice, and later he just became post Back in Black Brian Johnson. But vocally, if you really listen carefully to the technique he's doing, he's doing absolute vocal acrobatics, and it sounds amazing. As in the tone and the feel of his vocals are amazing. So mainly this vocal contribution puts it right up there. Why this is one of my favorite albums. I can see what you mean. Like, how to explain? All the songs, I can tell they're different songs because they are clearly, AC/DC do use a formula, very similar chords, etc. It's rock and roll. That's sort of what they do. But there's enough variety in the songs, I think, in regards to like verse, chorus, pre-chorus, in composition wise, even though it might sound the same and there's not a great deal of variation or dynamics in what the instruments are doing, but the chords they're playing, I think it is different enough for me to make it interesting.
I think that tends to be a weakness in my listening. This is where my preference to listening comes in. It's in the same thing that I will talk about later. Certain singers, again, I can appreciate how good they are at singing, but my ears get fatigued if I listen. If they're a one-trick pony, which
AC/DC are easily,
there's another band. There's another band that I will talk about in a bit, which now has what I would call a one-trick pony singer, and I appreciate what they do, and I can listen to it and enjoy it, but after a couple of songs, I'm done. I'm fatigued. I need variation. I need something absolutely different. And when all you hear is the same kind of like, it almost, to my ears at least, it flatlines. I need peaks, and I need variation, because I flatline. Like my ears flatline to that sound, and then it just kind of drowns out, and I almost can't. I can't listen to it physically. Not that I choose not to. I just can't. I almost don't hear it anymore, because there's nothing that piques my interest anymore. So it kind of just blurs out to me. And that's the problem I got with this album. It's just it's very, very vanilla. It's a very influential album, and if we take into consideration that this was Brian's first album, wasn't it? With them,
that's right.
Like the boots he had to fill with Bon Scott was insane. Like, I'm trying to think of anyone. I mean, singer wise, I don't know who this could be the equivalent, but it's the equivalent, I guess, of Jason Newsted taking over from Cliff Burton. It's that idea, isn't it? It's that massive boots to fill. It's intimidating. So you've got to give it some, haven't you? And he did. He put his, as you said, he put his stamp on it.
Yeah.
He knew this first album.
Yeah. There's
a lot of people that loved Bon and still do, but he kind of has come out and gone, Back in Black, I need to make this mine, and I need to put my stamp on it, and hope that people respect that. And it turns out they have.
So Ben, I'll stop there so we can move on. That is a great maybe topic for a future episode, is people who've had to replace other band members. and Big Boots to Fill. We'll put that in the title, Big Boots to Fill or something. So moving on quickly, because we've got so much to get through, and I know we're going to talk about a lot more because these are very exciting examples we've got down. So now, favorite song. It was getting into difficult territory now. What is your favorite song from 1980 and why?
I've got to get Spotify for this one. I am actually torn, and it's between 3 albums.
Oof. Three songs from 3 albums.
Actually, there's multiple songs on multiple albums.
On what? Okay. Okay.
But if I consider, my decision is being made based on the very first time I listened to it and my reaction to that first time listening to it, if you see what I mean. Like, otherwise I could be here forever trying to justify every song. So I'm gonna go out and say Neon Nights by Black Sabbath,
nice.
because
cool.
There were other, there's other songs in contention. Rapid Fire by Judas Priest, first song on their album, Phantom of the Opera, Prowler, Running Free, these are all songs. That's off Iron Maiden. Like, there's all these songs, and once I've listened to them over and over again, it becomes harder to kind of say, oh, actually, I prefer that over that. But if I consider my reaction, and my reaction went something along the lines of, ooh, when I listened to, it's the one that really, I had to focus on what it was. Oh, that's, and I had to turn it up to, so based off that alone, I have to go with Neon Nights.
Cool.
Because that's the most scientific way I can do it.
That's a great shout. It really is a good shout. Yeah. Again, I think the more I listen to the album and that song, the more I agree with you.
Again, Ronnie's vocals, the best way I can describe it is that they completely just encapsulate me.
It's almost like a spell.
Yeah, no, it really is.
It really is. That's the only way I can describe it.
As I talked about needing that variation, that's exactly what he does. You listen to it, and all of a sudden he hits a big old high, and you're like, oh, it wakes you up, and then all of a sudden he goes low, but then he's got this, he holds those lows, and they're, he puts, you're a singer, I can't. Vibrato, that's the one I couldn't think of.
Yeah, that's the one.
He gets the vibrato in the low end, and everything he does in between. Like, it kept me interested. But yeah, so for me, I have to go Neon Nights.
Good shout, man. Absolutely. So anyway, my favorite song, I've known this for quite a while, for many years. And yeah, probably the first time I heard it was on the greatest air guitar album of all time, when those were like Father's Day gifts for dads back about 20 years ago or so. I'll probably talk about this album, the songs from, a bit later, but my favorite song of that year is hands down Ace of Spades by Motorhead.
It's a damn good song.
I think it's pretty much, a flawless song. It's flawless in regards to how the rock or metal or punk as well thing operates in regards to structure, and you're in and out of each structure really quickly. This song is literally like a really fast car journey from A to B. It just happens so quickly. It is a chase. It's absolutely.
You're robbers being chased by the police.
Yeah. You
just robbed the bank.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good. Honestly, it is a great way to explain it. But again,
it's adrenaline.
Sound wise, it's a very interesting intro, because distorted bass chugging intros weren't. I can't think of any song prior to that had it. So it's just that the simplicity of the and just the speed metal drums coming in. And it's just and just the I love how they managed to encapsulate the energy of the room or the song onto the record. I think it's one of the greatest encapsulations of energy into a song I can think of in metal music. I think even calling it metal is tough. They never like to call themselves metal, just to remember. They always used to call themselves rock and roll. Absolutely. They're probably are one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. It's dirty rock and roll. It's grungy, dirty rock and roll. But this was speed metal encapsulated as well, just with the rough vocals rather than type of speed metal vocals we're a lot more used to with bands like Exciter, early Judas Priest, etc. But we could probably just almost do an entire episode on just this song. There's actually a lot of backstories to it as well. But again, just that the outro, the riff. Wow, wow, do, 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 do. It's just such a confident.
Yeah.
We've come, we've fucked you up, and now we're fucking off. Goodbye. Do, do, do. And that's all I can think of when I just hear those few notes. It just spells confidence. That's why I love it.
Interestingly, when we did an episode of best opening songs ever,
Yes.
none of us considered this.
I know.
I
know.
actually didn't realize, or I didn't click that it was an opening
song. Yeah, man. There's so many songs. We have to do a part 2 in that because there's so many other songs we missed. But
I very much think we could easily do a 5-part series on that alone.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, probably could.
Absolutely, because I didn't include Painkiller by Judas Priest, so that's got to go back on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, just to move on quickly again, my favorite songs. Yours is Neon Nights by Black Sabbath, and mine is Ace of Spades by Motorhead. So it's getting tougher in territory again. Papa Ben, favorite riff. Oh,
yes, I didn't want to go back just for variety's sake. I didn't want to go back to Heaven and Hell because there's a lot of bass work that I really like on it. Yeah. There's a lot of bass work I really like on it, and it was very easy. It would have been very easy for me to choose one of the bass lines basically from one of the songs from multiple songs from the album. But in terms of how fun it is, one, to play, and two, again, I don't know, if we think, I guess music at this time, again, wasn't very bass forward, was it? Bass was very much, I mean, it was in its, electric bass was still in kind of its infancy, I suppose you could say, in terms of nobody really knew what to do with it still, in terms of how, the technology, the speaker technology to actually listen to music kind of wasn't good enough to pick up a lot of bass, was it? Like, it was a lot of vinyl and, yeah, so it was hard. But Iron Maiden came along, and obviously it's basically Steve Harris band. They've made a career out of being very bass heavy and bass forward and bass led, and considering again, this album was their debut album in 1980. Again, bass wasn't exactly the most exciting thing in the world to listen to, and yet they hit the ground running with an absolutely amazing debut album. On that album in particular, my favorite riff, so getting on to my favorite riff, it actually, for me personally, to play and to listen to, because it's just so much fun, is the opening riff to Phantom of the Opera, because it's a bass riff.
Do you know what my favorite riff is?
God, is it the same thing?
It's Phantom of the Opera. You can tell it's absolute wankery for bass players.
Yeah.
But it's just not the opening riff. It's the minute that comes after it as well.
Yeah.
Because you've also got, and I didn't have enough time to plug my guitar in today as well. Plus, I've hurt my thumb, so I can't play. But you've also got that dun 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 dun, and then you got that run up.
Yeah.
And then you got the main riff. It's just it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up, and it's just proper high octane, rock metal music. And
it's great.
As a bass player, it's really good if you're learning to play bass and you're practicing speed playing on the bass. But that song, Phantom of the Opera, is actually quite a tricky song to play on the bass.
It is.
Because of the stamina. It's very much like, reminds me of The Four Horsemen by Metallica. You're playing so much. Yeah. That's just because there's hardly any rests or breaks for the bass player. You're pretty much constantly playing. So, there's very, very little... There's very little time to break. So I think I might as well. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is she's mine as well. Just I was wondering if we'd have the same answer for anything, and it's come in normally the most difficult question: favorite riff.
Yeah,
but as you said, it's based. That's what makes this album very different to what came before. How the bass is almost a lead guitar in some songs, because it's. The guitars will harmonize over what the bass is doing.
Yeah.
And not the bass playing a bass line to go behind the lead guitars. If you see what I mean.
And that has never changed, even when like they've now got 3 guitarists, and still the bass is the most noticeable thing
Yeah,
on their
absolutely.
sound, along with Bruce's vocals. But yeah, also on a side note, before we move on, it was really lovely to hear an album without Bruce. And that's not taking too much away from Bruce. That sounds very mean, but it's just
Yeah,
you associate Bruce and his lyrical
yeah.
and his singing style with Iron Maiden. So to listen to, I can't remember his name, the original.
Paul Di'Anno.
Thank you, Paul Di'Anno. To listen to that, it's really fresh on the ears, because it's still the Iron Maiden sound, but all of a sudden it's like it's really fresh,
You
which
almost
is
got
ironic.
a punk singer, someone who's a lot punkier rather than operatic. Excuse the pun, because we're talking about Phantom of the Opera.
Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, there we are. Well, that was a genuine shock. I wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I've actually got down here my notes: Phantom of the Opera / because of the. There's actually lots of riffs in this song which are amazing. So I'm going to have to mention it because, and its influence on bands that come after. But it's "Am I Evil" by Diamond Head.
Okay.
Because that, of course, is 1980. So obviously in the
Metallica
Big Four
covered that.
Yeah, in the Big Four concert, the four of them came together and performed the song. Metallica obviously did it on, as I think, Garage Days Revisited and Garage Inc.
Where are Diamond Head from?
Bugger me, I got a feeling. I think they're from the UK. I think. Let me just double check. King Diamond are Danish, but not Diamond Head. No. I think.
So like Diamond Head are a English heavy metal band from Stourbridge.
There you go. So so it was the new wave of British heavy metal still. Yeah. But so I'd have to mention that as a close second, just because there's you've got the bum 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 bum. That's one riff. Then you go ba da 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 da. Then you go diddle diddle diddle. It's just that she's full of it. Then this is why I should have brought my guitar down. There's so many good riffs in the song. Yeah. So I had to mention that one. But again, same as you, Phantom of the Opera is just the one for me. So let's move on. Now we've got favorite album cover. I don't really normally have much to say on this, but no, really. So I've got an answer, but and it's a very different one to what we've been talking about so far. So, what is your favorite album cover from 1980?
Okay, so I've been torn, and I still am, between two, because they're both very, very iconic. I'm actually torn. I'll tell you the two options, and maybe you can help me decide. I'm torn between British Steel. Yeah, it's that image of the hand holding the giant razor blade. Yeah. And Iron Maiden's first album as well, because it's the first time you see it's Eddie. It's the first time, and again, it's just like the thing I like is the album cover for British Steel does what it says on the tin.
Yes.
You hear British Steel, you see, you hear the name, you see the thing, and you say, yes, that makes total sense, and it works. It just works. It encapsulates what it's meant to be. Eddie, on the other hand, you look at that. If you go back to 1980, where you have no idea who Iron Maiden are, and you walk into a vinyl shop and a record store, and you take a look, and you see this thing staring at you. It's so like, what the hell is that? I've got a you'd want to buy it just for that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think for that alone, I'm going with Iron Maiden, because I just think it's the birth of Eddie, which I believe, I'm already saying he's featured on every single album. There might be one album he didn't feature on. There's one album he doesn't feature on. It's either this one album or he's featured on them all. But either way, I just think it's the birth of Eddie. It's so iconic and it's so different. And I can just imagine walking into, if you didn't know who Iron Maiden was in 1980 and you walked into a record shop and you saw that, you would have to pick it up and you would have to know what it's all about. So
that's amazing.
So yeah, that's my choice anyway. What about yours then, Hugh?
It's probably it's definitely a lesser known album. We've been talking pretty much so far about arguably the leaders of the pack in in new wave of British heavy metal, but this band, I don't know much about them after 1980. I've only heard this one album. And I wouldn't say I was disappointed by the album, but I was underwhelmed by how different they sounded compared to how I thought they'd sound by looking at the album cover. And
Okay.
that's why I've gone for this album cover. But it's the band Witchfinder,
Okay.
and it's the album Give 'Em Hell.
I'm gonna have a
Because
quick look at this.
it looks like a Venom album cover. And I think Venom and black metal took massive inspiration from this album cover, because it's got is it the pentagram, or it's definitely got the star, and it's got is it the goat looking creature on the front with the horns?
Oh God, yeah.
I can't remember what the name is called, or it's called, but
yeah.
This just looks so evil and so dark. And if you were a kid,
Yeah.
and you had pocket money and your mum wasn't looking and you're in HMV or a record shop, you'd want to buy this because you know it looks wrong, but you have to buy it because of curiosity.
It looks,
there's something about it.
It looks exactly like a Celtic Frost album cover.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah. But yeah, so this is 1980. I don't think you had like in late 60s, early 70s, a band called Coven, which was sort of like a very dark sort of folk rock band, sort of one of the earliest sort of influences of the imagery of heavy metal and black metal as well. Maybe not so much musically, but thematically in the lyrics as well. But so my favorite album cover, just because of the shock value of it, rather than what the music that goes behind it. I think there's only one song on this album that actually looks and suits the appearance of the album, and it's the final song called, I think, Wake Up Screaming. The rest of the album's a lot softer, not as heavy as I thought it was going to be, judging by how it looked. But yeah, Witchfinder, Give 'Em Hell would be my favorite album cover of that particular year. So next, we've got our last three now. We might talk about these for quite a while. So Ben, from 1980, what do you think is the most influential album that was released that year?
This is hard, because I am happy to admit Back in Black is so unbelievably iconic and would have influenced, like, that album alone, never mind their previous stuff, would have influenced so many kids who then went on to become successful rock stars just because of this album. It's very hard to not say Back in Black. I'm kind of having a good old think, and again, as much as I could say something like Iron Maiden, again, I think the influence for Iron Maiden came later, because it's a debut album. It's very, it's very hard to create a lot of that level of influential when it's your debut album. By the time maybe Power Slave came out, it's different then. So I'm going to say Back in Black, because I can't deny it. It is probably, not just in heavy metal, if you were to list the most influential albums, full stop, of all time, it's probably going to be in the top 50.
Yeah, that again, it is highly regarded.
Yeah.
Again, because it's one that sort of, it stands at a crossroads of people of all sort of backgrounds of music listening can probably sit down and enjoy it together.
Yeah. And as much as I can't listen to the album sitting down listening to it like I can with a lot of other albums, if a song from that album came on the radio, I'm not going to turn the radio off. I can still listen to it and I can still enjoy it. I just can't do it as a listening experience when I'm doing a whole album.
Yeah.
But I can appreciate what it's done. So
cool, man. Cool. A lot shorter than I thought you were going to be there. But I'll try and keep it as short as well. I'll sort of do what you did. I've got like primarily one answer, but I've got a close second. My close second is probably going to be Lightning to the Nations by Diamond Head.
Yeah.
Mainly the guitar work on it is just brilliant. Really, probably one of the better guitar works, I think, in riffage and lead guitar works, I think, in this sort of era of the new wave of British heavy metal. I'm not going to talk about this link too much, but I think Diamond Head were one of James Hetfield's and Metallica's favorite bands.
I believe they were.
And based on that, I think this is a heck of an influential album because of what it made Metallica and the thrash metal bands do in 1982, 1983 onwards. Especially like with songs like Am I Evil, it just, I think that song was really ahead of its time as a song. Compositionally, I think it was really, really ahead of its time. So that's a close second, but to me, I'd say I think the most influential album, because it arguably influenced 2 or 3 genres going on next to what eventually would happen in 2 or 3 years' time. And I've given a song from this album as an example so far, and I have to say this album in full now, and it's Motorhead's Ace of Spades. It's just, I think that heavy distortion sound, which it became the key Venom sound. It became the key Celtic Frost sound as well, even though Celtic Frost was slower and groovier than and weren't quite doing speed metal per se. But it's just that heavy, that bass distortion sound, which not other bands really had that much of at that time, especially because they were what you call a power trio. So there was so much volume in the bass to make up for arguably what a second guitar might be doing. And then just that sort of grimy vocals, almost like Lemmy's vocals, very much almost like an imitation of what the bass was doing. It was a growl. It was very much like it was very much a growl. But, you know, Ace of Spades, the album, and Motorhead gave birth, or specifically, Ace of Spades definitely gave birth to what next year's Welcome to Hell by Venom, and then Black Metal by Venom. And that kickstarted thrash, the first wave of black metal. I find it difficult to give credit for Venom for much about death metal, as there is a link. Yes, there is. But black and thrash metal more so. But so I'm saying I think the most influential album of that year is Ace of Spades by Motorhead. I really want to say Iron Maiden for the twin harmony guitar work, which they were doing, because they definitely knocked that up a notch. But I want to say Ace of Spades by Motorhead. I think that's my most influential album from the year 1980.
Lovely.
So this is just interesting now. Now we're going on a bit of a downer. The most disappointing album.
Oh, okay, I've been waiting for this one. I've been waiting for this one, and I am going to upset some people. Let's just put it.
Can I get more water just so I can spit it out of the computer when I hear your answer? Just for dramatic effect. I finished, you see. So
okay, so brace yourself. Most disappointing album was, for me, Blizzard of Oz. So which is by Ozzy Osbourne. It was his debut solo album, and to many it's considered one of the greatest albums of all time. To me, it's considered a massive disappointment, and basically it has the same problem, and this is the problem I have. When you listen to certain albums, I made this mistake when I did it for 1990, and I listened to Rust in Peace, and then I listened to, was this South of, no,
it was Seasons of the Abyss.
Seasons of the Abyss, thank you. Straight after, and it just your perception of what can be done in that year gets absolutely annihilated when something is so good or so ahead of its time. And that's what I did. I listened to, I was on such a high from listening to Heaven and Hell. I was thinking, well, if that's what they could do, surely Ozzy's going to be able to, like, he's going to want to up that. He's going to want to really up. And I genuinely was like, what the hell am I listening to? Like, it basically, there's no balance to the album whatsoever. Balance sonically in the sound. It's basically, and I understand Randy Rhoads. He had a very, very short career. Obviously, died tragically young. You know, what could have been would, you know, we could only have guessed now. I totally understand he is, you know, considered probably one of the greatest, or could have been one of the greatest, you know, however you want to look at it. But the Blizzard of Oz album was the Randy and Ozzy show, and that was it. And a lot of solo projects have this problem. They, you know, if it's a solo project by a guitarist, it's just guitars and everything else, and maybe vocals, and everything else is just an afterthought. And this is exactly what I thought with this album. I listened to it and I just I as soon as it clicked to me that this was just, all I could hear was guitar and vocal, and that was it. There was basically, like, when I say there wasn't, obviously it's there, but it was, and yeah, there was every so often when I was like, oh, there's a little bass lick there, oh, that's nice. But the actual mix of the sound was horrific. It was just everything, like, the, you know, the two of them were out here, and then I was like rummaging around in the back to try and listen to the drums and the bass, and every so often you'd get a little tidbit and be like, oh yeah, that's nice, but that is it. I shouldn't have to
Yeah.
rummage around, like, my ears shouldn't have to rummage around to find these things. I should be able to just listen and take it in. And
It's
I
like
couldn't.
It's like Rest in Peace. That's why we love that album
Yeah,
so much,
it's
because
so complete.
the crispness of, you can hear everything that's happening
Yeah,
on
yeah.
a level playing, very much
It,
like any or later Cannibal Corpse album, isn't it?
oh, it's stunning. Yeah, and I just, I don't know. I thought, oh, maybe it's the headphones. I tried different headphones. I tried different speakers, and every time I listened to it, I was hating it more. I was just getting so frustrated with it. So I no, honestly, it's such a disappointment. I'm sure live it sounds great when the mix is fine, but it solo. A lot of solo albums have this problem. There's no balance to their album because it's one or maybe two people, depending on the situation, that are doing this album. There's no balance to it. You know, they dictate a lot of they almost all the creative, the creativity behind that album, and as a result, it's all whacked out of sync, and I couldn't enjoy it. Absolutely couldn't enjoy it. So yeah, not that I'm going to shit on it anymore, but
just to back you up, like,
yeah,
I had an online argument with someone the other day, so sort of completely irrelevant, but relevant at the same time. You know, just for the record, you're obviously not knocking Randy Rhoads' his contribution whatsoever. Again, it's the mix, it's the it's mainly the mix, and again, just the frequencies. I had an argument with someone the other day that they said Randy Rhoads gave the greatest contribution of classical music in rock or metal music than anyone ever. It's like, I don't think you can say that on someone who only released one album, obviously because they died young. First of all, Richie Blackmore came first. 10 years prior to that. You then had Eddie Van Halen 3 years before that, 2 years.
Malmsteen.
Well, Randy Rhoads came next, and then Malmsteen took it to a different level. But and these guys have all had careers spanning, you know, decades up until recently. Eddie Van Halen passed away. So yeah, an argument. So it's difficult to say that on one album, but just listening to it as the Randy Rhoads show, there's made, you know, that he did heck of a lot for like neoclassical shred metal, definitely. But my two biggest problems with this album, I've never liked Randy Rhoads' guitar tone. Maybe in the lead guitar bits, probably okay. But when he then does the riffs, I just don't like the distortion sound. It's just something that's never sat right with me, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But it's just it's just the sound, or maybe how he holds the pick. I don't know what it is. It's just something I've never really liked. And secondly is when the song Mr. Crowley finishes, which is arguably the best song on the album, especially for lead guitar work. After that happens, I don't want to listen to the rest of the album.
It just cliff-dives, doesn't it?
Yeah. You hear that there's one really long song, I think it's called Revelations, with again amazing guitar work. But regardless of songs, there's a lot of really poor songs on this album. I think there's only 3 really good songs. Crazy Train, Suicide Solution, and
Mr. Crowley.
Mr. Crowley. Those, I think, the three that stand out. But, you know, it's nowhere near an album I'm disappointed with. But when I heard you say this, and again, you told me this weeks ago. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but I was overacting when you told me this was your, because I knew you were going to say it.
Yeah.
But after I listened to it after you said that, and I could sort of take it in. I never really realized about the mix until you mentioned it, and then I realized I also never liked the guitar tone. It sort of all came together. But I've known this album for a long time, and you know, it has been years since I put it on. I had to force myself to listen to it again because I knew I wasn't going to find anything really new.
Yeah.
But I was wrong. I don't actually remember listening to the last two songs ever before. So I discovered two whole new songs because, again, you hear Mr. Crowley and, yeah, I think Goodbye to Romance is that? No, I can't remember what comes next. I can't remember the track order. But, yeah, I feel then it just gets, type of thing.
You've got No Bone Movies and Revelation.
That's it, yeah.
And then Steal Away the Night.
Steal Away, that's it. Yeah,
and then You Looking at Me, Looking at You.
That's it.
So it's kind of, Mr. Crowley's about halfway through this album. So
cool. Anyway, so Blizzard of Oz, Ozzy Osbourne is your most disappointing album that year. There's two I've got here. I'm sort of torn to say which ones I really find the most disappointing. Like, I was doing a lot of research about power metal and the earliest contributors to power metal, because I wasn't that familiar with the contributors besides, say, early 80s. You got Manowar or Accept. And then late 70s, you could say the Scorpions had a hand in, early Scorpions, Rainbow again, Judas Priest. But people kept mentioning a band called Manila Road from the United States. And I thought, I'll give this band a try. And I heard the opening track of their album, Invasion, from 1980. I thought, what the fuck are people talking about? I just don't like that. I just, again, tone-wise, I didn't like the tone. I thought riff-wise, it was incredibly poor opening. And I really struggled to get on with the rest. I turned it off halfway through. I just didn't see it. Maybe this was them in their rawest form.
Yeah.
And I might need to listen to a lot. I will give them another shot, definitely. Or maybe it was too raw, and maybe the quality of the album with the funds they had, it just didn't work. So I was really disappointed because I don't know what my expectations were, but I went in with a reasonably open mind. But I just didn't enjoy it at all. There's not many albums I've actually stopped halfway through and not listened to the rest of it. And obviously, you know, we've got permission to do that. You know, we us as METALIDADS, we've got kids. We haven't got the time to listen to an album. If we think it's shit, we're not going to listen to the rest of it because, you know, we got dishes to wash, or we got hoovering to do or something. But yeah, so Manila Road, Invasion, I really struggled with. And then another one, mainly is because I saw this band live as a support act, Jesus Christ, 16 years ago in the Cardiff Motorpoint Arena, supporting Motley Crue. And it's the band Killing Joke.
Okay.
They are easily the shittest live band I'd ever seen in my life. I just didn't like them at all, mainly because they were sort of industrial, sort of early 80s industrial punk.
Okay.
Or so it was very different. There were three really different bands on. So you had not Black Keys, the Black something. The Black Velvets, I think they were called. Sort of an AC/DC-ish band without the screaming, with more of a Franz Ferdinand type of vocals. And then you had Killing Joke, and then you had Motley Crue. But Killing Joke, they just had the bass player is dead now, but the bass player who thought he was fucking Jason Newsted looking at the crowd like, very much like Liam or Noel Gallagher of Oasis, just this big cockiness. And I just didn't get it. The guitar tone was awful, the bass tone was awful, the crowd is, I don't know, I just didn't like them, so seeing them live. And then this was their first album. Again, in punk terms, they were very influential on, again, industrial sounding punk, and I completely get that. But for me, it was a bit too raw when I saw them live, and I like raw. I like Napalm Death, for fuck's sakes. But I just couldn't listen to this album. I listened to it halfway through, and then I had to stop it.
Mm.
But weird enough, on this album, I think it's this album, Metallica covered a song on Garage Days Revisited and Garage Inc. It's called The Weight.
Okay.
But they Metallica like them, but I'm not using Metallica as my like moral
No.
scale at all. But yeah, so probably I can't choose. Manila Road Invasion and Killing Joke's debut album, self-titled Killing Joke, probably the most two disappointing albums because I couldn't finish them. Again, it was just sort of it got my eyes and ears have been opened a lot to all the listening you and I have done through Rockerspective. And it's enabled me to break through that brick wall of stuff I normally wouldn't enjoy listening to or want to listen to, but I'll give it a shot. I'll give it an opportunity. I'll wait until I get to the bit of the album. But maybe on this particular day, I had something. I think I had Killing Joke on when I was cooking supper, and I had to do something else. I thought, I'd rather have silence.
You've got better things,
Yeah, I don't want this anymore. So my two disappointing albums would be Manila Road's Invasion and Killing Joke's self-titled debut album. So we've made it now. How are we for time, by the way?
How are we for time? Let's have a look. We're coming up to about 50 odd minutes.
Oh, Christ, this is good. So okay, excellent.
This is great.
At last, we're on time. So for our final theme, I suppose, we've got, this is only one I've added in tonight because there's a couple of albums I'm not really being able to discuss yet because the title hasn't been quite relevant. But I've got most surprising albums, and one that sort of made you go, oh, hello.
Yeah.
Without it being your favorite, but ones you didn't reckon you'd enjoy, but did.
And then you did, yeah.
So, do you have one or two that you've been listening to that sort of caught you by surprise? Please don't say Heaven and Hell because you've already mentioned
that. I've just got them up here. I was pleasantly surprised because I just didn't know what to. It's not that anything against them. I just didn't know what to expect by Saxon's album Strong Arm of the Law. I thought, I've listened to it a couple of times, and I personally wouldn't say it's one of the strongest albums I've ever listened to, but I went into that album not really knowing what to expect, and I was pleasantly surprised when I did listen to it. Especially, I swear I've got a thing for opening songs. If you've got a strong opening song, I'm more likely to listen to the rest of the album. And in this one in particular, I believe Heavy Metal Thunder is a great opening track, and it's possibly, without knowing the inner workings of Metallica, you could say that the riff for Four Horsemen was heavily influenced from this particular song, because it's so, like, as soon as I listened to it, I think I messaged you as soon as I listened to it. I was like, that sounds exactly like, when I say exactly, like, it's uncanny. It really is uncanny. So I wouldn't be surprised if you got, like, well, Mustaine probably, if you got Mustaine into a room and said, were you influenced by that to write Four Horsemen? And he said, yes, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting, we will eventually do a topic on plagiarism in metal, because it's plagiarism's a funny thing. 99% of the time it's absolute bullshit, because you've only got 12 notes in Western music. Some things are going to sound the same. Metallica have openly come out before and said, I think that's why they did the Garage Inc. album, because I think they weren't really accused, but a lot of people drew a lot of comparisons by their songs to other to other songs by other artists. And I think a big reason why they did Garage Days Revisited and Garage Inc. was to pay tribute. Well, if it wasn't for these bands, yes, we wouldn't exist, because they were a major influence on the music. So at the end of the day, inspiration is, it's where's the line, isn't it?
Yeah.
A self-respecting musician does not sit down in a room and think, oh, I like that, I want to rip that off because that's successful. People don't do that at all. No. So I know, obviously, that riff, Heavy Metal Thunder, people like that, the movement or the sequence of the notes, and I'll do something similar. And then that gives you inspiration to start an entire completely different song that has nothing to do with that song they just listened to. It's just how inspiration works, doesn't it? So
exactly.
is that just the only one? Any other albums?
I
So,
mean,
so
apart,
strong arm because they released 2 albums that year, didn't they?
yeah. Oh, what's the other album?
Wheels of Steel. Is it Wheels of
Wheels of Steel.
Steel?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again, it was okay, but it's definitely not as strong as Strong Arm. Strong on the Law was the stronger of the two
I
albums.
agree. I agree with you.
Definitely stronger. Um. Oh, Angel Witch.
Ah, yes.
So I
How the
was
hell have I forgotten about that?
I just realized I looked at my thing. I was pleasantly surprised by this one as well because again I just went into this not really knowing what to expect. Apart from the fact that I love the fact they got a song called "Angel of Death" on this album, which it I can tell you now it is not like the Angel of Death that you can also imagine, but it it's it's a great album. It's not a well I assume it's not a concept album but it's very what's the word
Heavily
um
themed.
yes, heavily themed, thank you, around kind of well it's kind of very fantasy kind
The
of driven, isn't
occult.
it?
A lot of
Yeah.
occult.
um yeah, I just thought it was a good it was a good listen, it was entertaining, and it's it's made it onto my albums that I on it's like my top shelf, if you know what I mean. Like all when we do these Rockerspectives, there's certain albums that stand out to me, and I think I that once I finish the Rockerspective, I normally get rid of all the albums that we've listened to from that particular year, so I can move on to
Yeah.
the rest. But there's a few that always get left behind on that top shelf, if you want to call it that. And that's one album that I have had sticking around because it's one that I'm happy to go and listen to again at some point.
Cool, man.
Didn't blow me
As an
away, but it was excellent.
nice as an opening song, Angel Witch. Funny is Iron Maiden and Angel Witch have got something in common with this debut album.
Mm.
They've got a song which is also the band name and the album name. So Iron
Yes.
Maiden, first album's called Iron Maiden by the band Iron Maiden, Angel Witch, Angel Witch, Angel Witch as well.
Yeah.
So I wonder how many examples that there are of that in metal. It's quite
I'd love
funny.
to know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to waste my time, but one day when my kids have left the house and they've flown the nest, I'll put some time in. But yeah. So I'll just go on to mine now. So my most surprising album, definitely Angel Witch. I'm not a huge fan of the vocals. I think they let the
No.
album down. It's a bit waily. But if you had, for example, I don't know, someone like the Venom singer who's around Kronos around that time, that album would have been a different monster altogether because I
Yeah.
think that's what makes it a threatening, raw, heavier sounding album is the vocals.
Yeah.
Now, I think that album is probably one of the heaviest albums of that year because I can hear a lot of Celtic Frost
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
there as a lot of what Celtic Frost became or Hellhammer years later. So I think in regards to black metal and even early sort of deathish metal in regards to the guitar, maybe even the sound, I think this album was very, very, very influential in that regard. I know we're talking about most surprising album, not influential album, but I was really surprised by how much I didn't realize how much they contributed to the heaviness of metal, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. As is the next band, local boys now, Budgie.
Yes.
Burke Shelley of Ely in Cardiff.
Yeah.
Budgie, so the album Power Supply, brilliant rock and metal album. It's just, again, another power trio, bass singer, again, Burke Shelley. I really enjoyed this album as a listen. There was so much variation in the songs. Some were faster, some were slower. It just had, again, a really good distorted bass sound. And just great, very tidy guitar work, plenty of variation. And, his vocals are very high, very much like Geddy Lee of Rush. So almost sounds otherworldly sometimes. But yeah, I really enjoyed Budgie's Power Supply. I don't think I'd ever heard an entire Budgie album until this Rockerspective. I heard the odd songs, most famous one being Bread Van, which Metallica covered on Garage Inc.
Yeah. They covered two of their songs, didn't they?
Oh yeah, Crash Course in Brain Surgery. That's the other
yeah.
one. That's a cracking one. I absolutely loved. I even played this in the car when I think my wife and my family were driving somewhere. And if my wife doesn't shout to me for having a particular rock or metal album on, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But it's Girls' School Demolition. It's just a brilliant, in-your-face, rocky, punky type of proto proto metal album, I suppose. Very much like in the spirit of Motorhead, where it's punkier rather than more metal. But it's just nice, refreshing hearing female vocals. It's an all-girl band, and that's what I love about this band, because it's just so fresh. I hate saying different, like I'm pointing them out. It should be, there's loads of all-girl bands, but this time they were actually quite pioneering for having women in rock and metal. And Girls' School are one of Lemmy's favorite bands.
Yeah.
He loved these bands. I don't know if he was trying to get into bed with any of them. Who knows? I don't know. But he loved them. And Motorhead actually did a song with them. Or Lemmy might have appeared on a song, or Girls' School appeared on a Motorhead song. I can't remember. But a brilliant album. It's really good. It's probably the best driving album of all these albums we're talking to. It's just brilliant to drive to. Really enjoyed it. But probably the most surprising album, a band I've known for years. I'm very familiar with the back catalogue, but I just never listened to their debut album my entire life. And I was surprised how rockier and heavier they were in this album. And it's Def Leppard's On Through the Night.
Okay.
It's got one of the shittest album covers ever, just like a lorry randomly floating through space, which I think is weird. But there's some really great songs on this. Plenty of energy, really great guitar riffs. You had Phil Collin and Steve Clark. So you eventually, years later, you had Vivian Campbell of Dio join Def Leppard. I think that was 1992. But yeah, so I've never been a huge fan of Joe Elliott's vocals, but his vocals suit their earlier music better than the later part of their career. But probably the album I was surprised by the most, as well as Saxon Strong Arm of the Law as well. Probably the biggest one is probably Def Leppard's On Through the Night. I had to listen to it twice on the trot, because I just loved the listening experience so much. I wanted to hear it again. So so that'll be my favorite one. So Def Leppard,
Lovely.
On Through the Night. And Papa Ben, I think we made it to just under an hour.
Just about, I think. Which was a miracle, to be honest.
It's an absolute miracle. So probably a good way to end it there. Thanks so much for your company tonight. It's been really interesting just trying this new format and just discussing, probably a time which is slightly out of your comfort listening.
Yes.
I was quite, I've not even mentioned Judas Priest tonight, which is very weird for me. I've not mentioned British Steel, but again, that's another album I could easily say could have been my favorite in almost any of these questions, especially, with Rapid Fire, Metal Gods, for example. That could have easily been a favorite song and favorite riff, because there's so many juicy bits in that as well. But that's it, guys. So that was 1980 Rockerspective.
Do we know what we're doing? It's 2020 next time, I think, isn't it?
I think we're going to try and do 2020 next. We're going to do a complete switch to, from 40 years ago or 41 years ago to 40 years later, so 2020. So stay tuned for 2020. So to all our listeners, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Thank you very much for your company as ever. And for yourself as well, Papa Ben, thank you very much for your opinions tonight. It's been really interesting doing the show. And remember, no matter the podcast topic, whether it's whammy bars or weaning, napalm death or nappies, it's always good to talk.
See you again soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Good.
Catch you soon. See you in the next episode of Rockerspective. All the best. Cheers. Thank you. No star.